Imagine trying to govern an empire, like the size of Europe.
Oh, easily that big.
Right. A massive expanse covering frozen steppes, dense subtropical jungles, and these huge flood-prone river valleys.
Yeah, the geography alone is staggering.
And now imagine that within this vast territory, none of your tax collectors, none of your regional generals, and definitely none of your everyday citizens can actually understand a single word the others are saying.
It would just be pure noise to them.
Exactly. A merchant from the south and a magistrate from the north might as well be from different planets. Under normal historical conditions, an empire like that just shatters.
Right, it fragments.
Yeah, it breaks into dozens of smaller nations, much like the Roman Empire did. But, over 2,000 years ago, one civilization solved this impossible logistical nightmare.
And they did it with a specific technology.
A technology so powerful it became the continuous operating system for a quarter of humanity. Usually when we talk about learning a new language, we frame it as a simple translation exercise.
Like a one-to-one swap.
Right. You take your existing thoughts, your existing English worldview, and you just swap out the vocabulary. You put a different case on the exact same smartphone.
But that analogy totally fails here.
It does. Because what if a language isn't just a new case? What if learning a certain language is actually installing an entirely different operating system for your mind?
That is the fundamental shift in perspective required here. I mean, when you change the operating system, you fundamentally alter how the hardware processes the world.
Yeah.
A new linguistic structure dictates, what you naturally pay attention to, how you perceive the passage of time, and structurally how you place yourself within a room full of other human beings.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are looking at a language system that functions less like a tool for simple communication and more like a civilizational architecture.
It's a massive topic.
It really is. We are analyzing an incredibly thorough set of linguistic and cultural notes focused on the Chinese language. Material centers heavily on Mandarin, or modern Standard Chinese, as the dominant public form today.
But we have to remember, it casts a vital net over the entire Sinitic language family.
Yeah, exactly.
Distinguishing between those two, the single standardized form and the broader family of languages is a critical piece of the puzzle we have to establish early on.
Right. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore how Chinese isn't just a way of speaking. It's a structural mechanism designed to maintain a civilization across millennia.
So, okay, let's unpack this.
Sure.
Where do we even begin to wrap our heads around a linguistic system with this kind of ancient, unbroken continuity?
Well, we begin by completely discarding our English language assumptions.
Just throw them out entirely.
Pretty much. To genuinely understand Chinese, you have to stop comparing it to English or French or German.
Okay, why is that?
Because European languages evolved to solve European geographical and social realities. Chinese was engineered to solve a completely different set of human, spatial, and political problems.
That makes sense. The most illuminating comparison in the source material looks at Latin. In the West, Latin was the centralized anchor of the Roman Empire.
Right. Everyone in charge spoke Latin.
Exactly. But as populations moved apart, as geography and time took their toll, Latin fragmented. The spoken Latin of the Iberian Peninsula drifted away from the spoken Latin of Gaul.
So they started sounding completely different.
Crucially, the written language fractured right alongside the speech. It eventually calcified into distinct, mutually unintelligible languages.
Like Spanish, French, Italian.
Exactly. Romanian, too. But Chinese did the exact opposite.
Wait, how does a language do the opposite of fragmenting over thousands of years of geographical expansion? That defies basic linguistic entropy, doesn't it?
Well, the spoken speech absolutely did diversify, and wildly so.
Okay.
As populations expanded across massive mountain ranges and complex river systems over centuries, spoken Chinese evolved into highly distinct, mutually unintelligible varieties.
So the entropy happened verbally.
Yes, the spoken word fractured, but the written center held them together.
Wow.
Chinese didn't emerge as a single, neat spoken language that simply spread outward. It is much more accurate to understand it as a continuous written tradition layered over a massively diverse spoken landscape.
So it's a civilizational language sphere. It's almost like an umbrella.
Yes, an umbrella is the perfect way to look at it.
You have this ancient, continuous written tradition acting as a massive umbrella, and underneath that canopy, you have an incredibly diverse ecosystem of spoken languages that, to the ear, sound completely foreign to one another.
That umbrella metaphor is vital. Underneath it, linguists trace a massive historical arc. We start with Old Chinese, which had complex consonant clusters and lacked the distinct tones we associate with the language today.
Wait, Old Chinese didn't have tones.
No, it really didn't. Tones came later. It evolved into Middle Chinese, where tones began to heavily define the acoustics.
Oh, interesting.
From there, the language branched into the modern Sinitic languages we hear today. You have Mandarin in the north and southwest, and a dense cluster of southern languages, including Wu, Yu.
And Yu encompasses Cantonese, right?
Exactly. Yu, Min, Hakka, Shang, and Gan. Modern Standard Chinese grew primarily out of the Northern Mandarin speech patterns,
Yeah.
specifically the prestige dialect of Beijing.
Okay, got it.
But all of these spoken varieties, no matter how phonetically divergent, inherited that massive ancient umbrella of the shared written word.
But keeping a written language unified while the spoken languages drift apart across a continent-sized empire, I mean, that requires an immense amount of deliberate effort. It requires a mechanism of enforcement.
Oh, it requires absolute statecraft. The pivotal historical anchor here is the Qin dynasty, right around the 3rd century BCE.
The first emperor, right?
Yes, Emperor Qin Shi Huang. When he unified the warring states, he didn't just unify the borders, he executed the first major ruthless government standardization of the written script.
He standardized everything, didn't he? The axle widths of carts, the weights and measures, and
And the physical shape of the characters themselves. He links the script directly to administrative survival.
that is wild.
Think about the sheer logistical nightmare of that era. You have tax collectors, generals, and local magistrates spread across thousands of miles.
Yeah, no radios, no internet.
Right. A magistrate in the southern coastal regions cannot verbally understand a military commander from the northern plains. If they tried to speak, it would just be noise.
So how do you issue a nationwide law?
Exactly. How do you command troop movements? How do you collect grain taxes? You simply cannot rely on phonetic speech,
You need a shared visual medium.
one that bypasses sound entirely. The written word became the structural glue of the state. It is why Chinese historically feels less like one spoken language with a transcription system and more like a written civilization with a multitude of regional voices reading it aloud.
That completely reframes the entire concept of literacy. The writing isn't just a convenient way to record speech. The writing is the civilization itself.
It really is.
But if this script was fundamentally tethered to ancient bureaucratic power, designed for scholars and state officials, it must have been incredibly divorced from how a farmer or a merchant actually spoke in their daily life.
Oh, it was entirely divorced, completely separate.
Golly.
Yeah, for over 2 millennia, the prestige written form was classical Chinese, or Wenyanwen. It was an incredibly dense, highly elusive, telegraphic written code.
Telegraphic, like shorthand.
Kind of. You could not speak classical Chinese aloud and be understood. It was meant purely for the eye and the brush.
So it was just a visual code for the elite.
Exactly. It was the language of the elite scholar official class. But that brings us to the next massive historical anchor, the May 4th, or New Culture movement, erupting in the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
This is when the intellectual class realized that if China was going to modernize and achieve mass literacy, they couldn't force 1 billion people to learn an ancient telegraphic code that had no relation to their spoken voice.
Exactly right. The leaders of the New Culture movement pushed for a radical shift in prestige.
What did they do?
They advocated for replacing classical Chinese with baihua, which basically means vernacular or everyday speech.
Oh,
They essentially declared that the written language should reflect the grammar and vocabulary of the spoken tongue.
so they finally bridged the chasm between the elite brush and the everyday voice.
And it was a seismic shift. Shifting to baihua catalyzed modern Chinese prose, modern journalism, and widespread mass literacy.
It democratized it.
It democratized the written word, but crucially, it did so without breaking the ancient umbrella. The characters remained, their arrangement just shifted to mirror modern speech.
That's brilliant.
Decades later, the People's Republic of China accelerated this by heavily promoting Putonghua Standard Mandarin as the national spoken language.
They introduced pinyin too, right?
Yes, alongside Pinyin, the official romanization system for teaching pronunciation, and simplified characters to further boost literacy rates, they explicitly tied language reform to modernization and national integration.
So if the written word is the anchor of this civilization, and it was engineered to hold together a vast, diverse space rather than just transcribe the linear speech of an individual, that must fundamentally alter the internal architecture of the language.
It absolutely does.
I mean, it has to change how a basic sentence, and therefore a basic thought is constructed.
It alters it at the root level. Let's examine the syntax, the actual load-bearing architecture of a sentence.
Let's do it.
Modern Standard Chinese is classified as SVO, subject, verb, object. So on a superficial level, a sentence like, I eat rice, operates on the same sequence in both Mandarin and English.
Okay, that seems familiar enough.
But beneath that surface, Chinese utilizes a drastically different cognitive logic. It's fundamentally topic prominent.
Topic prominent. Okay, let's strip away the linguistic jargon. What does a topic prominent thought process actually look like in practice?
Well, consider what English prioritizes. English grammar is obsessed with the actor and the action. We say, I already read this book. The subject, I, is the absolute center of the universe, followed immediately by the action read, and the object, this book, is just the passive recipient of my action.
So we put ourselves first.
Exactly. Chinese logic frequently flips this entirely to prioritize the topic, the environmental situation. The structure often translates conceptually to, this book I already read.
This book I already read.
Wow.
So you are physically placing an object on a table in front of us, establishing what we are looking at, and only then do you introduce the actor to make a comment about it.
That is the precise mechanism. English demands to know who did what, asserting the individual's agency first.
Very individualistic.
Extremely. Chinese demands to set the stage first, establish the shared situation, and then provide a commentary on it.
That's fascinating.
Sentences are organized around what we are collectively focusing on first, followed by what is being said about it. It shifts the psychological framework. Thinking in Chinese feels less like drawing a straight, aggressive line of agents performing actions and more like arranging ideas inside a shared contextual room.
A placement of ideas inside a shared room. That totally makes sense for a culture prioritizing the collective environment. But hold on, I have to push back here.
Go ahead.
If you are just placing ideas in a scene, and as the linguistic data shows, Chinese has virtually no inflection. I mean, there are no verb conjugations, no rigid tense markers like we rely on in English. How does anyone know when anything is happening?
That is the classic question.
Because in English, I literally cannot speak without stamping a time on my action. I have to say, I eat, I ate, or I will eat. The grammar forces me to time travel.
Right.
If a Chinese verb never changes its shape, how do I know if the book was read yesterday or if it will be read tomorrow?
That confusion is the hallmark of an English-speaking mind encountering a different temporal operating system.
It's so disorienting.
English forces you to anchor every single utterance to a rigid chronological timeline. You are legally required by English grammar to mark past, present, or future.
Yeah, I have to pick a lane.
Chinese simply does not care about that rigid timeline in the same way. Instead of focusing on tense, Chinese focuses heavily on aspect.
Aspect over tense. Okay, explain the mechanics of that. What is aspect?
Tense is about locating an event on a clock or a calendar. Aspect is about the state or the phase of the event itself, regardless of the clock.
The phase of the event.
Yeah, like, is the action fully completed? Is it currently ongoing? Is it a lived experience that you carry with you? Is it a sudden change of state?
Oh, I see.
Chinese utilizes surrounding context, specific time words like yesterday or next year, and most importantly, subtle grammatical particles to indicate these phases rather than morphing the verb.
So instead of conjugating the verb to walk into walked to prove it happened in the past, how does the aspect system handle it?
You use the base verb for walk, and you might append a particle like li to indicate that the action has been realized or completed.
Just a little tag at the end.
Basically, you aren't saying, I walked in the past. You are essentially saying, I walk, and the status of this action is now complete.
Wow, that makes discourse feel entirely different.
It really does. It's less like walking along a mandatory historical timeline attaching labels to everything, and more like observing a scene where the temporal shape of events is inferred from the state of the objects and the context of the speaker.
It seems vague to me, honestly.
It's actually not a vague system at all. It is highly precise. But the precision comes from situational arrangement rather than constant, aggressive grammatical stamping.
That requires an immense amount of situational awareness from both the speaker and the listener. You can't just isolate the verb and know exactly what's going on. You have to read the entire room of the sentence.
Exactly. You're always reading the room.
And speaking of reading the room, if the baseline grammar is so heavily focused on the whole situation rather than the isolated actor, how does that framework bleed over into how the language processes the internal human experience? Like, how does it handle emotion and logic?
What's fascinating here is how deeply the language integrates what the West insists on tearing apart.
Okay, tell me more.
Let's look at the classical Chinese concept of sting. In a standard English dictionary, you will see this translated simply as heart,
Right.
but within Chinese philosophical and linguistic vocabulary, the only accurate translation is heart-mind.
Heart-mind. That is a radically different starting point for human consciousness.
It really is.
Because in English, and broadly in Western philosophy, we are constantly fighting a civil war between the two. Listen to your head, not your heart.
Yes, that deep Cartesian split inherited from the Enlightenment.
Exactly. Reason is cold, calculated, and logical. Emotion is warm, messy, and irrational. They live in completely separate departments of the body.
And Western languages reflect that split constantly. We say we lose our minds to our emotions.
Right, like they're battling for control.
But in the inherited conceptual center of Chinese thought, cognition, feeling, moral judgment, and motivation are not sharply separated entities. They interpenetrate completely.
So they are one and the same.
Yes. You are not a rational mind, unfortunately burdened with carrying messy emotions around in a separate bucket. You perceive the world through
Through the heart-mind.
Therefore, emotional maturity in this linguistic framework does not sound like mastering and suppressing your irrational feelings with cold logic.
What does it sound like then?
It sounds like harmonizing your inner emotional dispositions with your outward rational conduct.
If you are operating with a heart-mind, you are an integrated whole. You aren't endlessly dissecting your own consciousness. And if the language naturally integrates the internal self, and if its grammar naturally sets the shared stage before declaring individual actions, it stands to reason that this language would profoundly dictate how people relate to one another in the physical world.
It provides the absolute foundation for a deeply relational social web.
How does that compare to English?
English defaults to the isolated, autonomous individual asserting their preferences against the world. I want, I think, I demand.
Very ego-driven.
Right. The Chinese linguistic and cultural framework imagines the social world as an inescapable field of bonds, obligations, and moral texture. The individual does not exist in a vacuum.
So who are you then?
The individual is only defined by where they are situated within a network.
The source material provides some incredible vocabulary to illustrate this social density. There are concepts here that people frequently label as untranslatable.
Which is a bit of a misnomer.
Right, to be clear to you listening, it's not that a concept is literally impossible to explain in English. It's that these words are so culturally dense, they require a full paragraph of English explanation to accomplish what Chinese does in 2 characters.
Perfectly said.
We need to dissect a few of these, starting with Mianzi.
Mianzi is casually translated as face, but that barely scratches the surface of the social mechanics at play.
It's not just about looking good.
No, it isn't merely about personal vanity, reputation, or avoiding a momentary embarrassment. Mianzi refers to your socially visible dignity, your structural standing within a specific network, and the highly delicate management of mutual respect in public relationships.
Let's ground this for the listener. Imagine you are in a corporate boardroom. You are a senior executive, and a junior analyst catches a minor mistake in your presentation.
Okay, classic scenario.
In an English-speaking context, the analyst might bluntly point it out, and the culturally approved response is to say, "Good catch, thanks." It's entirely transactional.
Very straightforward.
But in a framework governed by Mianzi, if that junior analyst bluntly corrects the senior executive in front of an audience, they haven't just hurt feelings.
Yo, it's much worse than that.
They have actively damaged the executive's Mianzi, their structural authority in that room, and in doing so, the analyst damages their own standing by showing a lack of relational awareness.
Precisely. Mianzi is a social currency. You can give it, save it, borrow it, or destroy it.
A social currency, I love that.
And managing that currency connects directly to the next critical concept, ranking.
Okay, what is ranking?
This is often weakly translated as human feeling or favor. In reality, ranking is the moral emotional economy of human obligation.
The emotional economy.
Yes, it operates on the premise that human relationships are never purely contractual.
Okay, so in the West, if you help me move my couch, I buy you a pizza. The debt is settled, the ledger is at 0, and we're even.
Right.
We like being even because it means we are independent again. I don't owe anyone anything.
But ranking despises a zero-balance ledger.
It wants debt.
In a way, yes. If you do me a significant favor, it is not a sterile debt to be paid off quickly so we can ignore each other. It creates a warm, ongoing, socially remembered indebtedness.
Oh, that's beautiful.
You want an active flow of ranking debt circulating within your network because that mutual obligation is the very fabric that binds the community together.
What happens if you refuse to play the game?
A person who refuses to engage in ranking, who insists on strictly paying for everything and never owing anyone, is seen as cold, calculating, and socially defective.
It's the gravity that keeps the social solar system together, which brings us to a concept that completely reframes how we perceive chance encounters. Yuan Fen.
Yuan Fen is a profoundly beautiful linguistic concept. It's often rendered as fate or destiny, but those English words imply a rigid, unavoidable predetermination.
Like it was written in the stars and you have no choice.
Exactly. Yuan Fen points to a fateful, almost karmic affinity between people. It's the intuitive sense that a specific encounter, a friendship, or a romance has ripened into possibility because environmental conditions, timing, and unseen forces have mysteriously aligned to bring you together.
So if we meet and become close friends, it's not just blind, chaotic luck, it's Yuan Fen. The universe acknowledges that our connection has a structural reason for existing.
Yes, it gives an incredible weight to human relationships.
It really does. And then there is a word that completely shifts how we evaluate our physical environment, renow.
Yes, Renau. If you look it up in the Standard Dictionary, you will see noisy or bustling.
But in English, noisy is almost exclusively a complaint. It's too noisy in this restaurant, I can't hear myself think.
Right, we want peace and quiet. But Renau, which literally combines the characters for hot and noisy, is a highly positive, deeply sought-after atmosphere.
Hot and noisy is a good thing.
A very good thing. It describes a space that is lively, festive, socially warm, and pleasantly saturated with human activity.
Okay, paint me a picture.
A night market full of shouting vendors, sizzling food, and shoulder-to-shoulder crowds isn't an annoyance, it is Renau. It is the joyful, vibrating energy of being fully immersed in the social web.
Imagine moving through a world where this level of relational density is just linguistically ambient.
You can't escape it.
You are never just a lone protagonist walking through an empty video game level. You are constantly navigating the currents of Mianzi, managing the obligations of ranking, acknowledging the timing of Yuan Fen, and seeking the warmth of Renau.
It's a very full way to live.
And this isn't just high-level philosophy. It's woven into the most basic ways people address each other. The way hierarchy is mapped onto the vocabulary is fascinating.
It is ubiquitous. Consider kinship terms. In English, you use aunt or uncle strictly for your literal blood-related family members.
Right, unless it's a very close family friend, but mostly blood.
In Chinese, the vocabulary of family extends far beyond biology. You might address an older neighbor, a local shopkeeper, or a friend's parent using a specific kinship term.
Just to be nice.
This isn't just being polite. It is actively mapping social closeness, generational ranking, and structural respect onto the everyday world. You are never addressing someone as an isolated unit.
You are immediately locating them in a social geometry relative to yourself.
Exactly.
You are constantly asking, consciously or subconsciously, where do you sit in this web? And what specific linguistic marker do I use to honor that position?
That's spot on.
And nowhere is this social web more intimately expressed, and I found the mechanics of this in the notes absolutely brilliant, than in the language of food.
The vocabulary of Chinese cuisine is arguably the most perfect mirror of both the language's geographical vastness and its social intimacy.
How does the geography play into it?
Well, geographically, the Sinitic language family spans immense contrasting ecological zones. You have the northern, arid, wheat-based plains, the southern, humid, rice-based terraces.
Don't forget the river systems.
Right, the riverine aquaculture centers and the mountainous fermentation and preservation cultures. Because of all this, the language had to develop an incredibly granular vocabulary.
Granular like what?
It possesses hyperspecific verbs for distinct methods of steaming, braising, flash frying, and simmering that simply do not have single-word equivalents in English. The language is an ecological archive.
But it goes beyond scientific taxonomy. Food operates as a social sentence. One of the most famous examples is the traditional greeting, which translates literally to, "Have you eaten?"
Yes.
To a Westerner, this sounds like a direct invitation to dinner. But historically, it functions more like asking, "How are you?" or are you okay?
Precisely, and there is an immense amount of subtext in that greeting.
What kind of subtext?
In a historically agrarian society where famine was a recurring civilizational threat, asking about food is asking about baseline survival and well-being.
Oh, wow. So it's very profound.
But even further, when you discuss food or offer food, there is a hidden running social script. Who is feeding whom, in what specific mood, and with what degree of care and abundance.
So food is the ultimate physical expression of ranking.
Exactly. It treats nourishment not as individual caloric fuel to keep the machine running, but as the literal ingestion of a shared social relation.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
The richness of this operating system isn't just floating in the abstract definitions of words. It is structurally built into the physical environment.
The physical environment of the language itself, yes.
Which brings us to the actual physical reality of Chinese itself, how it looks on a page and how it sounds in the air. Because the visual and sonic mechanics of Chinese are fundamentally alien to an alphabetic mind.
They require entirely different neural pathways. Let's start with the visual psychology of the characters. As we established with the Qin dynasty, Chinese writing is logographic, not alphabetic.
So no ABCs.
Right. When you look at an English word, say BAT, you do not see a flying mammal or a wooden stick. You see a set of instructions for your mouth.
Instructions for your mouth. That's a great way to put it.
You sound out the letters to produce a sound, and that sound points to a meaning.
Right. B makes a plosive sound. A makes a vowel sound. The letters themselves have zero inherent meaning.
Exactly. Chinese bypasses that phonetic middleman. Now, we have to dispel a very common, very Orientalist myth here.
Let's hear it.
Chinese characters are not just simple little pictures of things.
They aren't.
No. Yes, a few of the most ancient characters, like the character for sun or moon, originated as pictograms. But the vast, overwhelming majority of the tens of thousands of Chinese characters are what linguists call semantic phonetic compounds.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of a semantic phonetic compound.
Huh.
How does that actually work on the page?
It means the character is constructed of distinct components. Usually, one component, often called the radical, provides a strong hint about the category of meaning, while another component provides a hint about the sound.
So it's like a two-part puzzle.
Exactly. For example, if you see a character containing the radical for water, which is 3 distinct drops on the left side, you immediately know the word has something to do with liquid, rivers, or washing.
Even if you've never seen that exact character before.
Right. The other half of the character will guide your pronunciation.
But the psychological effect of reading this way must be profound. In English, learning to read trains your brain to rapidly convert geometric lines into an invisible stream of sound.
Yes.
In Chinese, reading trains your brain to instantly link a complex visual architecture directly to a meaning, a sound, and thousands of years of history simultaneously. You are interacting with stable, physical objects on the page.
It is a deeply architectural experience. It feels old and it feels weight-bearing. When an educated reader looks at a character, they aren't just seeing a word.
What are they seeing?
They are looking at a shape that has evolved systematically through ancient bone scripts used for divination, bronze inscriptions on ceremonial vessels, rigid seal scripts of the early empires, fluid clerical scripts, all the way down to modern standard forms.
So the page is literally an archaeological site.
It is.
Which perfectly explains why calligraphy is elevated to the highest form of high art. It isn't just neat handwriting. It is a major cultural practice, formally recognized by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage.
It demands an incredible level of discipline.
Yeah, writing a character trains your physical attention to stroke order, visual balance, rhythm, and the actual breath required to execute the brushwork. It is a moral, meditative, and aesthetic discipline.
It is the physical embodiment of the culture's pursuit of harmony and balance.
Okay, so we have established the visual weight of the language. But here's where it gets really interesting, the sound.
The acoustics.
Right. Because Standard Chinese is a tonal language. Speech is not just a linear chain of consonants and vowels. It is a highly constrained choreography of pitch.
A choreography of pitch is the exact right phrase.
Explain how that differs from English.
To an English speaker, pitch is used strictly for emotion or emphasis. If I say right with a rising pitch, I'm asking a question. If I say right with a falling pitch, I'm confirming a statement.
It's the same word.
Exactly. The underlying word means the exact same thing, only my attitude changed. In a tonal language like Mandarin, pitch is baked into the dictionary definition of the syllable.
Standard Mandarin has 4 lexical tones, plus a neutral tone. A flat, high pitch, a rising pitch, a dipping then rising pitch, and a sharp falling pitch,
You got it.
which means the exact same phonetic syllable, say ma, can mean mother, hemp, horse, or to scold, entirely depending on the melodic contour of your voice.
Yes, ma is the classic example everyone learns day one.
So if you use the wrong pitch, you haven't just mispronounced a word, you have said an entirely different word.
Which forces us to ask a fascinating mechanical question. How does music function in a tonal language?
Exactly. If you are a pop songwriter and you want to write a soaring, rising, emotional melody for the chorus, but the specific lyric you need to use has a sharp falling tone, what do?
It's a massive challenge.
If you force the word to rise with the music, does it turn into a completely different word?
It creates an incredibly complex cultural feedback loop between the composer and the lyricist. Songwriters and performers must constantly, delicately negotiate the relationship between the mandatory lexical tone of the word and the artistic musical melody of the song.
That sounds exhausting to write.
If you stretch, bend, or flatten a tone too aggressively to fit a melody, the audience literally might not comprehend the lyric. The meaning disintegrates into noise.
Wow.
So, Chinese music and lyric writing involve a deeply ingrained, almost mathematical awareness of contour and cadence. The language arrives at the recording studio already possessing its own inherent melody.
That makes the language incredibly dense and compact. You have these short, sharp, single syllables that carry a massive functional load because their tones multiply their meanings.
Right.
But mathematically, because the phonetics are relatively constrained, Mandarin only has around 400 basic syllables, which multiplies to about 1,300 possible sounds when you add the tones. You inevitably end up with a massive bottleneck.
You do.
You have tens of thousands of concepts crammed into 1,300 sounds. That means you have a staggering number of homophones, words that sound exactly the same.
The homophone density in Chinese is staggering compared to European languages. And that structural reality makes Chinese humor, poetry, and social interaction an absolute goldmine for puns, homophones, and character-based play.
It's like playing a card game where the suit of the card, the tone, completely changes the face value, but half the deck looks identical until you look closely at the suit.
A very apt analogy. In English, humor often relies on observational absurdity or a sudden reversal of expectations.
Like a punchline.
In Chinese, the physical shape and the acoustic overlap of the language itself is frequently the punchline. You can subtly swap one character for another that sounds identical but means something wildly, ironically different.
Creating layers of visual and acoustic subtext.
Completely invisible to an outsider, but hilarious or profound to a native speaker.
And this reliance on implication, this constant acoustic wordplay, it actively shapes how people navigate conflict, doesn't it? It shapes how people insult each other.
It does, and this loops right back to the foundational concept of mianzi, or face.
Right, because you can't just attack someone.
Because open, blunt confrontation and frontal verbal attacks risk completely destroying someone's face, which in turn damages your own relational standing in the network conflict is often highly indirect.
You don't just scream at someone that they're incompetent.
No, that would be incredibly crude. Instead, insults rely heavily on sarcasm, on quoting an elevated, four-character historical idiom in a deliberately wrong or ironic context.
Oh, that's clever.
Or using a homophonic pun to imply incompetence without ever explicitly stating it. The language provides an incredibly rich, sophisticated arsenal for managing dignity, signaling displeasure, and establishing dominance purely through implication rather than shouting.
Speaking of different tones, acoustic overlaps, and layers of meaning, this brings us to a topic that we have to clarify, because it might be the biggest source of confusion for anyone looking at Chinese from the outside.
I think I know where you're going with this.
It is the biggest internal contrast within the Sinitic language family itself. We need to talk about the rivalry of reach versus texture. We need to analyze the mechanics of Mandarin versus Cantonese.
This is undoubtedly the most misunderstood aspect of the Chinese linguistic world in the West.
I hear it all the time. People always say, oh, my friend speaks Cantonese, which is just a dialect of Chinese, like a southern accent.
That drives linguists crazy.
Exactly, because the linguistic data explicitly states that Mandarin and Cantonese are as fundamentally different from each other as Spanish is from Italian. How can they be the exact same language if they are that different?
This is where we return to our core metaphor. We have to separate the ancient umbrella from the diverse people standing underneath it.
Okay, break that down for us.
Mandarin and Cantonese share a writing system, that continuous logographic script anchored by the state thousands of years ago. But their spoken acoustic worlds are completely mutually unintelligible.
Completely.
Yes. If a Cantonese speaker from rural Guangdong who only knows Cantonese and a Mandarin speaker from Beijing who only knows Mandarin try to have a verbal conversation, they will fail. It will sound like foreign noise to both of them.
But if you hand them the exact same daily newspaper,
They can read it flawlessly. They will look at the exact same sequence of characters in standard written Chinese.
oh,
The Mandarin speaker will process the visual data and read it aloud using Mandarin pronunciation rules, applying four tones and northern consonants.
and the Cantonese speaker.
The Cantonese speaker will process the exact same visual data and read it aloud using Cantonese pronunciation rules, applying 6 to 9 tones and southern consonants.
That is mind-blowing.
The visual meaning is entirely shared. The acoustic reality is entirely different. It is literally like a Spanish speaker and an Italian speaker looking at the exact same Latin text, understanding the meaning perfectly, but pronouncing it according to their own modern diverged linguistic rules.
That is wild. It's a dual-track reality. Okay, so let's look under the hood of these two specific spoken worlds. What makes them so mechanically different to the ear?
Standard Mandarin, which was modeled on Beijing pronunciation to serve as the national standard, has roughly 1,300 tonal syllables. It relies on those four primary tones. Because of its historical evolution and northern geographic influences, it lost many of the harsh ending consonants found in older versions of Chinese. Acoustically, it sounds more smoothed out, open-voweled, rolling, and standardized.
And what about Cantonese?
Cantonese, on the other hand, which is historically centered around the Pearl River Delta, Guangzhou, and Hong Kong, is much more conservative. It preserves a vast amount of ancient Chinese phonology.
Meaning it sounds closer to what poetry sounded like 1,000 years ago.
In many respects, yes. It has over 2,200 possible syllables. It retains older, sharp final consonants like P, T, and K.
Much sharper.
And crucially, it utilizes at least 6 distinct tones, though some linguistic models count up to 9 depending on how you categorize entering tones.
6 to 9 toned and almost double the syllable.
Exactly. So acoustically, Cantonese sounds much denser, much sharper, more staccato, and incredibly contrast-rich. It is a highly textured auditory experience.
Now, I need to jump in here and explicitly untangle a myth that drives linguists absolutely crazy.
Well, please do.
People constantly mix up the spoken division of Mandarin versus Cantonese with the written division of simplified versus traditional characters. They assume Mandarin automatically equals simplified characters, and Cantonese automatically equals traditional characters. We have to break that down.
It is a ubiquitous confusion, but it completely conflates the spoken medium with the written script. Mandarin and Cantonese are acoustic spoken realities. Simplified and traditional are visual written forms.
So why do people mix them up?
Well, the confusion exists for a very real historical reason. Politically and socially, the mainland People's Republic of China heavily promotes standard Mandarin speech alongside simplified characters. Meanwhile, Hong Kong heavily uses traditional characters and speaks Cantonese. So the geographical association exists.
But mechanically, they're totally separate tracks. You can write Mandarin using traditional characters, which the entire population of Taiwan does every single day of their lives.
Absolutely.
And conversely, you could write colloquial Cantonese using simplified characters.
Precisely. They're separate systems.
Wow.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture of our analysis, what does this division between Mandarin and Cantonese actually represent socially and culturally today?
I'd say it represents the tension between the national highway and the local city streets.
It is a profound story of power dynamics. Mandarin is the undisputed language of reach. As Putonghua, it is the standardized language of the centralized state, the medium of national education, the language of interregional bureaucracy, and the tool for modern global economic integration.
It has immense institutional and demographic power.
It is the broad, efficient, state-engineered highway designed to move information across 1 billion people as smoothly as possible.
Yes, but Cantonese, conversely, is the language of texture. While it may not possess the same national institutional power as Mandarin, it holds massive regional pride, fierce independence, and deep historical continuity.
And massive cultural influence.
Right. Throughout the late 20th and early 21st centuries, it held incredible pop culture prestige. Hong Kong cinema, the golden age of cantopop music, vibrant street comedy Cantonese, is the language of urban cool, of kinetic intimacy, and of vibrant, fast-paced colloquial life.
It's the old neon-lit city streets full of personality, distinct smells, and local attitude.
And this tension between the state-standardized highway and the regional textured city streets, it provides the perfect bridge to the overarching metaphor of this entire deep dive.
It leads us directly into Bannock's brilliant conceptual metaphor from the analytical notes, which I believe is the most elegant way to synthesize everything we have discussed about the Chinese linguistic operating system.
Let's lay this out because this metaphor is incredible. Bannock suggests that if operating in English is like driving a car down a straight, well-paved highway, then thinking in Chinese is like navigating on foot through a dense, living city.
Let's expand on the mechanics of that. On the English highway, everything is designed for linear autonomous momentum. You have clear, rigid grammar lanes. You have explicit, mandatory time markers flashing like road signs, past, present, future. You have clear subjects, the driver acting directly upon objects. You get in the car, you state your destination, and you drive straight there.
But Chinese is the city. In this city, you cannot just blast linearly forward. The streets are not laid out in a rigid grid. They are connected by context and implication.
Exactly.
The landmarks in the city are your topics. You must orient yourself by setting the scene before you make a move. The traffic patterns are the relationships, the mianzi, the ranking, that dictate how, when, and where you are socially permitted to move.
You have to read the room of the street.
Right. You don't just assert a trajectory. You move situationally, constantly aware of the ambient hierarchy, the social temperature of the crowd, and the historical architecture looming over you.
It is the difference between asserting an individual trajectory and navigating a collective environment. And what is fascinating is that the layout of this linguistic city is not a static museum.
It's still evolving.
It is still being actively zoned, rezoned, and constructed by modern political forces. The political reality of the language today is just as dynamic as its ancient history under the Qin dynasty.
The tension between centralized standardization and regional plurality is still the defining narrative. In the People's Republic of China, state law and educational policy heavily promote Natonkwa and simplified characters.
Which is a massive undertaking.
The stated goal is to drive modernization, facilitate economic integration across vast distances, and forge national cohesion. It is an immense ongoing effort to make that standardized highway as broad, dominant, and efficient as possible, sometimes at the expense of regional city streets.
Meanwhile, if we look across the strait to Taiwan, recent linguistic policy has taken a contrasting approach, shifting to legally emphasize a multilingual ecology.
What does that look like?
Taiwan officially supports, funds, and protects Taiwan Mandarin alongside Hakka, Southern Min or Taiwanese, and the various indigenous Austronesian languages. They have begun viewing linguistic plurality not as a barrier to efficiency, but as a core component of their democratic and cultural identity.
Just stepping in here for a rule check applied to our deep dive. We aren't taking a side on which language policy is right or wrong. Our goal is just to show you how these different governmental approaches are actively reshaping the linguistic map of the culture today.
Absolutely. The ancient umbrella is still shifting, still covering new realities.
It's fascinating to observe these two contrasting approaches, centralized, unified standardization on one hand, and legally protected pluralism on the other.
Which brings us to the ultimate synthesis of our analysis.
Yeah, let's bring it all together.
Chinese, whether we are examining the divination of ancient oracle bones, the topic-prominent syntax that sets the stage, the inescapable relational web of mianzi and rangting, or the acoustic divergence between Mandarin and Cantonese, is fundamentally not just a language.
It's an information processing system.
Exactly. It is designed to construct and maintain a civilization. It demands that you stop operating as an isolated unit, and instead asks you to place things correctly within a living, social, historical, and environmental field.
So what does this all mean? We started this hour by asking if learning a language is akin to installing a radically new operating system for your mind.
And I think we've proved that it is.
We really have. We've seen the mechanics of how Chinese achieves this. It relies on shared context over strict, rigid grammar. It relies on deep, emotional, relational webs over isolated, assertive individuals.
And it views time differently.
Right. It views time through the lens of aspect, phase, and state, rather than aggressive chronological timelines. It anchors its history in a visually profound architectural script, rather than a disposable phonetic alphabet. It is, from the root to the canopy, a system engineered for profound continuity.
And yet, even the most ancient, continuous, beautifully engineered systems must eventually face the shock of unprecedented new technology.
Oh, this is the perfect provocative thought to leave you with as we wrap up. Let's explore the digital disruption.
The analytical notes leave us with a brief but profound mention of modern digital typing, which opens up a fascinating, potentially disruptive question for the future of this civilization's operating system.
Lay it on us.
We have spent an hour establishing that the physical script, the logographs, has acted as the visual historical glue of this civilization for thousands of years.
Right. The calligraphy, the stroke order.
The physical act of writing, the slow, deliberate stroke order, the calligraphic balance, the muscle memory, actively trains the mind to see history, meaning, and art in the physical word. But today, the overwhelming majority of Chinese speakers, especially the youth, interact with the language via digital screens.
So how do they type thousands of characters on a tiny phone?
To type Chinese on a smartphone or a computer, they use pinyin. They use a standard Western QWERTY keyboard to type out the phonetic sound of the word using English letters, and the computer algorithm generates a list of corresponding characters on the screen for them to choose from.
Wow. So they are using a phonetic alphabet to summon a logograph. The physical muscle memory of drawing the architecture is replaced by the auditory memory of spelling a sound.
Exactly. And the cognitive implications of that shift are staggering. If generations grow up interacting with their ancient language first and foremost through phonetic alphabets on a digital keyboard, rather than the physical calligraphic stroke order of a brush or pen.
Will that ancient archaeological feeling of the written word begin to subtly fade from the cultural consciousness?
That's the question. Will the act of reading begin to feel less like recognizing a rich historical object and more like rapidly decoding a sound, much like English?
And if the physical and cognitive relationship to the writing system fundamentally changes in the minds of a billion people, does the integrated heart-mind of the civilization eventually change with it?
It's a profound thought to end on.
If you drastically change how you input the code, do you eventually, inevitably change the operating system itself? That is a massive, lingering question to mull over as you go about your day. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of the Chinese language.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope we've provided you with a new, complex lens through which to view not just a language, but human communication itself. Keep navigating the complexities of the city, keep questioning the underlying structures of the world around you, and remember, your mind isn't just a static piece of hardware. It's defined entirely by the system you choose to install on it. We'll catch you next time.